The most secure child in the state was crying alone on a cold linoleum floor. Her security detail had left the building, and the only person who heard her was a man they never even saw. Daniel was just finishing the mopping, a single dad working the late shift to make ends meet. He followed the sound to a locked classroom doorway, and there she was, a little girl hugging her backpack, utterly forgotten. The emergency number on her tag didn't connect to a babysitter. It rang directly on the nightstand of the governor of New York. Daniel was a man used to cleaning up other people's messes, not handling crises. The girl was Charlotte Hayes, the 7-year-old daughter of Governor Eleanor Hayes, who was at that moment live on television, completely unaware her child was missing. This was more than a simple oversight. It was a systemic failure that placed a vulnerable girl and an unprepared janitor at the center of a political firestorm. And with one call, Daniel was about to shatter the governor's carefully controlled world. To understand how this happened, you need to see the two worlds on a collision course. Daniel's world was defined by routine and quiet diligence. A former Army medic who left service after his wife's passing, he took the janitorial job at the prestigious Capitol Day School for one reason: stability. The hours allowed him to be home when his own 8-year-old son, Leo, was awake. His uniform was a blue jumpsuit, his tools a mop and a ring of keys. He was a ghost in the hallways, a man the powerful parents and the high-priced security teams looked straight through. Governor Eleanor Hayes' world was the opposite. It was a blinding spotlight of policy, polling, and permanent pressure. At 39, she was the youngest governor in the state's history, a rising star in her party mentioned for even higher office. Her image was one of flawless control, the polished blowout, the sharp blazers, the unwavering composure. Her daughter Charlotte's safety was managed by a 4-person detail from the State Executive Protection Service. Their protocol was meticulous, or so it seemed. Every school drop-off and pickup was logged, coordinated with the school's front office, and executed with military precision. The flaw was not in the plan, but in the human assumption behind it. The security team's shift change was at 7 p.m. The new team leader, Agent Miller, assumed the afternoon detail had completed the pickup. The afternoon detail, distracted by a last-minute intelligence briefing about a vague threat against the governor, a briefing that mentioned the asterisk governor, not her family asterisk, had mistakenly logged Charlotte as collected by alternate authorized party. They cleared the site and left. The school's front office administrator, seeing the state vehicle depart, assumed all was well and went home. The system had checked all its own boxes, and in doing so, it had abandoned a first grader. Daniel found her at 7:45, curled into a ball beside the locked art room door, her braids messy from crying. He didn't recognize her at first. He just saw a child, scared and alone, the way he feared his own son might be one day. His training kicked in not from the army but from parenthood. He knelt, kept his voice soft, and offered her the granola bar from his lunchbox. He asked her name. Charlotte Hayes, she sniffled. The name meant nothing to him. He asked for her mom's number. That's when she pointed to the laminated tag clipped to her backpack strap. It didn't have a phone number. It had a single, embossed line: "In emergency, call executive priority line." Meanwhile, in the studio, Governor Hayes was mid-debate. The topic was education funding. She was delivering a passionate soundbite about leaving no child behind when her personal aide, Mark, who had been monitoring the dormant emergency line, felt his hip vibrate. He looked at the secure phone screen. It read, "Call active, location Triangulatd 2 Capitol Day School." His blood ran cold. He caught the governor's eye off camera and gave the prearranged signal, a subtle tap on his own wedding ring. Her smile never faltered, but her eyes flickered with a millisecond of pure, undiluted terror. She finished her sentence, excused herself for a brief pause, and walked off the set looking perfectly calm. The moment she was in the private green room, the facade shattered. "Where is my daughter?" she demanded, her voice a low tremor. Back at the school, Daniel dialed the number. A calm, automated voice answered. "Please state the nature of your emergency and your security clearance code." Daniel, confused, said, "I don't have a code. I'm Daniel, the janitor at Capital Day School. I have a little girl here named Charlotte. She's scared and says she can't find her mom." There was a long silence, followed by the sound of rapid keyboard strokes. Then a new voice, male, razor-sharp and tense, came on the line. "Sir, this is Agent Cooper with Executive Protection. Do not move. Do not let her out of your sight. Is she injured?" "No, she's okay. Just upset," Daniel said, putting a reassuring hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "A team is en route. Do not engage with anyone else. Do you understand?" The line went dead. 23 minutes later, the quiet school driveway was shattered by the arrival of two black Suburbans, lights flashing silently. Governor Hayes stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped, her face pale under the courtyard lights. She was followed by a swarm of agents. Daniel, still sitting on the floor with Charlotte coloring quietly on a piece of scrap paper, looked up as the entourage stormed down the hallway. The governor's eyes locked onto her daughter, and she rushed forward, scooping Charlotte into a crushing hug. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the governor's whispered reassurance and Charlotte's relieved sobs. Then Governor Hayes looked over her daughter's head at Daniel. Her gaze swept over his jumpsuit, his name patch, his kind, worried face. The emotion in her eyes hardened into something else, a cold, calculating scrutiny. "You," she said, her voice now all authority. "My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow." She turned to her head of security, Agent Miller, whose career was visibly ending in that moment. "And I want a full audit of every protocol, every person on my desk by sunrise." As she swept out, Charlotte peeked over her mother's shoulder and gave Daniel a tiny, grateful wave. He waved back, alone again in the suddenly empty, silent hallway. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of kindness had just made him a loose end in a high-stakes political narrative, and that the governor's invitation was not to thank him, but to contain him. The governor's office wasn't a room, it was a statement. Polished oak, the state seal looming behind the desk, windows offering a commanding view of the Capitol dome. Daniel felt every speck of dust on his worn sneakers as he was ushered in by a stern aide. Governor Hayes wasn't sitting. She stood at the window, her back to him, a silhouette of power. "Mr. Cooper," she began, not turning around. "It's Daniels, ma'am, Daniel." She turned, a faint, practiced smile on her lips. "Daniels, of course, please sit." He remained standing. "I want to thank you," she said, the words smooth and rehearsed, "for your compassion toward Charlotte. In a chaotic moment, you provided comfort." She finally sat, steepling her fingers. "I also need to discuss the sensitivity of the situation. The security lapse was unacceptable. The individuals responsible have been reassigned. But the narrative, Mr. Daniels, is fragile. The story of a forgotten child could be exploited by my opponents to suggest instability, incompetence. It could damage public trust." Daniel shifted, the crisp air of the room feeling thin. "I just wanted to make sure she was okay." "And you did, admirably," she leaned forward. "Which is why I'm offering you a position, a newly created role within the Department of General Services, a facility management consultant. It comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits for you and your son, and importantly, a non-disclosure agreement." She slid a folder across the vast desk. "The NDA is standard. It simply states you will not discuss the events of last evening or your subsequent employment with any media outlet or private individual. In return, you have a stable, well-paying career. Charlotte gets to move on from a scary night, and the state avoids a distracting scandal. It's what we call a win-win." Daniel didn't touch the folder. He looked from the document to the governor's expectant face. The math was clear, his silence for a better life. It was the kind of transaction that powered this building, but he thought of Leo and the lesson he was trying to teach him about doing the right thing even when it was hard. "With respect, Governor," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I'm not for sale, and what happened to your daughter was a narrative. It was a failure. She was terrified. She deserves more than a cover-up. She deserves to know the people who were supposed to protect her are held accountable, not just shuffled to a new desk." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The governor's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of icy calm. I see. You mistake a gesture of gratitude for a negotiation. My daughter's well-being is my only concern. This arrangement is asterisk accountability. It ensures focus remains on fixing the problem, not sensationalizing it for clickbait headlines. I won't sign it, Daniel said simply. A long, heavy silence followed. The governor's eyes narrowed, assessing him not as a kind man but as a threat vector. Then you leave me no choice but to consider you a potential liability. Your access to school grounds, your proximity to children, these are things my security team will now have to scrutinize. Deeply. Good day, Mr. Daniels. Dismissed, Daniel walked out, the eyes of the aides and state troopers lining the corridor feeling heavier than before. He had just turned down a golden ticket and made an enemy of the most powerful person in the state. And he knew, with a sinking certainty, that her warning was a promise. The scrutiny would come. It began that afternoon. First, a call from the school district's HR department requesting a routine meeting to review his employment files. Then, a visit at his apartment from two polite but insistent investigators from the state's Office of Children and Family Services, asking detailed questions about his son Leo, his childcare arrangements, his work schedule. They were investigating an anonymous tip about potential neglect. Daniel cooperated, his heart pounding with a cold rage. They were using the system to pressure him, to find a lever. While Daniel was fending off bureaucratic shadows, Governor Hayes was launching her public offensive. 2 days after their meeting, she called a press conference. Flanked by the new head of the Executive Protection Service, she was the picture of contrite strength. Last week, she said, her voice resonant with emotion, a procedural failure within my security detail resulted in my daughter being left unattended at her school. There is no excuse. I have terminated our contract with the previous security provider. More importantly, I met with the state employee who found Charlotte, a veteran and a single father named Daniel Daniels. His calm and kindness in that situation were a testament to the quiet heroes in our communities. At my invitation, Mr. Daniels is consulting with our security team to provide a ground-level perspective on safety protocols. We are turning this personal failure into a catalyst for systemic improvement. It was a masterstroke. She had named him, framed him as a collaborator, and spun the story into one of resilience and reform. Daniel saw the clip on the evening news in his tiny living room, Leo asleep beside him. He felt a wave of nausea. She had just publicly tied him to her narrative, making any contradiction from him look like betrayal or insanity. The next morning, the knock on his door wasn't bureaucrats. It was Agent Miller, the disgraced former detail leader, now looking hollow-eyed and desperate. "He's here, Leo," Daniel said, guiding his son to his bedroom. He opened the door. "What do you want?" Miller's voice was a low, urgent growl. "You need to take the deal. You think you're standing on principle. You're standing on a landmine. She doesn't lose. She'll bury you. They're already digging. They've pulled your Army records." A chill went down Daniel's spine. His service was clean, but it was personal. "There's nothing to find." "Everyone has something," Miller spat. "A disciplinary note, a conflicted medic eval, something. They'll twist it. Unstable veteran in charge of children. You'll lose your job and then you'll lose your son. That's how this works. Sign the damn papers, take the money, and walk away a hero, or become the villain of the story she's already writing." Daniel stared at him, seeing not a threat, but a broken man who'd already been chewed up by the machine. "Tell her I'm not playing," Daniel said softly, and closed the door. But Miller's words echoed. The Army records. Later that day, Daniel made his own call to an old buddy from his medic unit who now worked at the Veterans Administration. "Hey, can you do me a favor? See if anyone's been pulling my file." The callback came an hour later. His friend's tone was grim. "Yeah, Danny, a formal inquiry came through yesterday from the State Attorney General's office, flagged as part of a background vetting for a sensitive public trust position." "That's you, huh? What the hell did you get mixed up in?" The pieces were locking into place. The governor wasn't just trying to silence him. She was building a case to discredit him if he spoke. She needed the janitor who found her daughter to be either a compliant ally or a damaged, unreliable source. There was no middle ground. Driven by a need to do something, anything other than wait for the axe to fall, Daniel went to the one place he thought might hold answers, the school after hours. Using his master key, he let himself into the main office. He ignored the computers and went to the old-fashioned sign-out ledger. He found the date, tracing his finger down the column. There it was. C. Hayes, picked up by EPS Detail 2, 1847. But scrawled in the margin in a different pen were the initials AM and the words ALT, auth, verified, AM, Agent Miller. He took out his phone and took a picture. It wasn't proof of a conspiracy, but it was proof the log had been altered after the fact. As he was leaving, a security guard who sometimes shared a coffee with him stopped him. "Hey Dan, you okay? Heard you're moving up in the world, consulting for the big boss." The guard's expression was uneasy. "Just watch your back, huh? Some stadies were here today asking about you. Not the friendly kind. Asking if you ever worked late alone, if you seemed too interested in the kids." The guard leaned in. "They were painting a picture, man. Be careful." The net was closing. The public saw a grateful governor and a heroic janitor. The reality was a targeted campaign of quiet destruction. Daniel realized he couldn't fight this from the shadows. He needed to force the truth into the light, but doing so would guarantee the full weight of the governor's office would come crashing down on him and Leo. He was trapped in her win-win scenario: silence or ruin. That night, holding the picture of the altered log on his phone, he made a decision. If they were going to come for him, they would have to do it in the open. He drafted a single email detailing the altered record, the pressure from Miller, the invasive investigations. He addressed it to the only journalist whose name he knew, a reporter for the Capitol Press Corps known for tough coverage. His finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Sending it was an act of war. He thought of Leo's sleeping face, and for the first time he was truly afraid. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity: he could not become a lie. He clicked send. The message whooshed away into the digital night. The war he never asked for had just begun, and the first shot was his. Now he could only wait for the explosion. The explosion wasn't a headline, it was a silence. For 3 days nothing happened. No reporter called, no story broke. The quiet was heavier than any noise. Daniel went to work, the school corridors feeling like a canyon, every glance from a colleague loaded with unspoken questions. The pressure campaign, however, didn't stop. A formal letter arrived from the school board placing him on paid administrative leave pending a review of personnel matters. It was a velvet glove over an iron fist, a way to remove him from the building without cause. He was now a man in limbo, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on the 4th day, but not from the direction he expected. His phone rang with a blocked number. He answered, bracing for another threat. Instead, a woman's voice, calm and professional, spoke. "Mr. Daniels, my name is Anya Petrova. I'm the investigative reporter you emailed. We need to talk, somewhere you feel safe." They met in a bustling public library, away from the cameras and Capitol corridors. Anya was in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She didn't have a notepad out. "Your email was compelling," she said quietly, "but it landed in a spam folder. A glitch or something more sophisticated. I only found it because I was already looking into something else. The no-bid contracts awarded to the new security firm the governor hired to replace the detail that failed. A firm called Sentinel Shield, founded by a former campaign donor." Daniel felt a spark of hope. "So you believe me?" "I believe something stinks," Anya corrected. "Your log photo is a start, but it's a scratch on the paint. To stop a machine like this, we need a wrench in the gears. We need to know why the lapse happened, not the bureaucratic failure the real reason. Was it just incompetence, or was the detail deliberately redirected?" She leaned in. "You said Agent Miller came to your apartment. He's a broken man, terrified. Broken men sometimes keep souvenirs. If he has anything, an email, a text, a memo, that shows orders coming from above to be somewhere else that night. That's our wrench. Finding Miller was the next problem. The man had vanished from public view. Daniel, using his old network from the VA, learned Miller was holed up in a fishing cabin upstate, drowning his disgrace. Daniel drove there, a 2-hour journey into the pine woods. He found Miller on a rickety dock, staring at the water, a bottle beside him. He looked 10 years older. "I told you to take the deal," Miller slurred without turning around. "I need your help," Daniel said, standing a few feet away. "Not for me, for the next kid, for the truth." Miller laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. The truth is I followed orders. We all follow orders. The briefing that night was a red herring, a potential threat assessment that required the full details presence for a sweep of the Capitol grounds. It came from the governor's chief of staff, Priority Alpha. The kid was supposed to be picked up by the lieutenant governor's wife. It was all in the amended protocol, but the message to the lieutenant governor's office never got confirmed. A communications error. He took a long swig. Plausible deniability. The boss gets to look like a victim of a simple mistake. The security firm takes the fall. A donor's new company gets a multi-million-dollar contract. And I get to be the fall guy who misunderstood. Daniel's blood ran cold. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated risk. A distraction fabricated to justify a lucrative contract swap with a child as an unintentional pawn. "You have proof of the order, the briefing memo." Miller finally looked at him, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "On a secure server, wiped clean the next day. They're not amateurs, Daniels. All I have is this." He fumbled in his jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a carbon copy of a sign-in sheet from the Capitol security desk the night of the incident. It showed Miller and his entire team signing in at 1900 hours for a Level 3 threat sweep. The authorization signature at the bottom was a rushed scrawl. Daniel squinted. It read C. Vance, Charles Vance, the governor's chief of staff. The original went to the server. This is the clerk's copy. He forgot to shred it. I found it in the trash. It was a thread, a tiny, fragile thread. Daniel took a picture with his phone. "Come forward with me," he urged. Miller shook his head violently. "No, you have it now. You do what you want. They find out I talked. They don't just end my career. They end me. Now get off my dock." Daniel returned to the city, the digital photo burning in his phone. He sent it to Anya. Her response was immediate. "This is it. This connects the order directly to the governor's inner circle, but it's still circumstantial. We need someone on the inside to corroborate the chain. We need to find the weak link in Vance's office." While Daniel and Anya hunted for their wrench, the governor's machine shifted into its highest gear. The personnel review at Daniel's job suddenly found traction. A local news station, not Anya's paper, ran a carefully sourced story. The headline was subtle but devastating. "Hero Janitor in Governor's Scandal Placed on Leave Amid Review." The article quoted anonymous school district sources concerned about protocol breaches and unauthorized after-hours access to sensitive student records. It mentioned the ongoing OCFS investigation into his home life. The hero narrative was being meticulously dismantled, brick by brick, replaced with the silhouette of a suspicious, possibly unstable man. The governor, in a follow-up press gaggle, was asked about it. She offered a pained, maternal smile. "My focus remains on my daughter's recovery and improving security for all children. It would be inappropriate to comment on a personnel matter at the school district. I will say I believe in due process for everyone." It was a flawless deflection. She appeared compassionate and fair, while her machinery did the dirty work. The effect was instant and brutal. Parents at Leo's school, having seen the news, began giving Daniel a wide berth at pickup. Whispers followed him in the grocery store. The social isolation was a new kind of pressure. Leo came home crying one afternoon because a kid said his dad was a weirdo who stole files. Daniel held his son, a fury building in him so pure it was terrifying. They weren't just coming for him anymore. They were coming for his boy. Anya called, her voice tight with urgency. "We have a problem. My editor just killed my story." He said it, unverified and politically volatile. Pressure came from upstairs. The paper's board has donors with ties to the governor. We're being shut down, she paused. But I have one more source, a junior staffer in Vance's office. She's scared, but she's angry. She agreed to a meeting tonight. If she talks, we have the corroboration. If she doesn't, this is over. The meeting was set for a neutral location, a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city. Daniel insisted on coming. He needed to look this in the eye. They sat in a vinyl booth, coffee growing cold. The staffer, a young woman named Sarah who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, slid into the seat opposite them. She didn't make eye contact. "I can't give you documents," she whispered, "but I can tell you what I saw." The threat assessment memo for that night was drafted after the fact. I saw Vance backdate the digital file. The timestamp was wrong. I know because I brought him the initial real memo for a different event, and he told me to leave and he'd handle it. The order to redirect the detail came from him, following a private meeting with the governor. It was about the Sentinel Shield contract. They needed a public failure to justify the switch. It was the confirmation, a human source from inside the inner sanctum. Anya's eyes were blazing. "Will you go on record?" Sarah shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, if I do, I'll never work again. Maybe worse, I'm sorry." She fled the diner. They had testimony, but it was anonymous. They had the sign-in sheet, but it was a copy. It was enough for a bombshell blog post, but not enough to survive the legal and political blast wave the governor would unleash. They were stuck. As they walked to their cars in the empty parking lot, Daniel felt the weight of defeat. They had the truth, but no way to make it stick. That's when the headlights blinded them. Two black SUVs boxed them in. Men in dark suits emerged, not state troopers but private security, Sentinel Shield. The lead man, his face impassive, addressed Anya. "Ms. Petrova, your employer has been looking for you. You're in violation of your leave agreement." He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Daniels, Governor Hayes is concerned for your welfare given the intense media scrutiny. She's offering you a secure location for your safety and your son." It wasn't an offer. It was a kidnapping dressed as protection. They were going to disappear him, discredit Anya, and bury the story. Daniel looked at Anya, who was already reaching for her phone. One of the security men moved swiftly, clamping a hand on her wrist. "No calls, ma'am." Daniel's mind raced. They were in a public lot, but it was deserted. He had seconds. He thought of the one piece of evidence they couldn't confiscate if it was already gone. As the lead security man reached for him, Daniel did the only thing he could. He threw his phone, the phone with all the photos, the recordings, the evidence, in a high, sweeping arc over the SUV. It sailed through the air and shattered on the asphalt 20 yards away. The men froze, startled by the irrational act. "It's backed up," Daniel lied, his voice loud and clear. "Everything is in the cloud, you can't erase it." In that moment of confusion, a local police cruiser, drawn by the commotion or perhaps sheer luck, turned into the lot, its spotlight washing over them. The Sentinel Shield men immediately stepped back, their aggressive posture melting into one of professional concern. "Evening, officer," the lead man said smoothly. "Just a concerned citizen intervention. Everything's fine." The officer, skeptical, approached. It was the distraction they needed. Anya yanked her arm free. "We're leaving, now." She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward her car. The security men didn't stop them, their retreat forced by the witness in blue. Daniel and Anya sped away, their hearts pounding. The phone was gone, but the bluff might hold them off for a few hours. They had crossed a line. The governor was no longer trying to silence them. She was trying to erase them. They were out of time, out of options, and running out of road. The only move left was the most dangerous one, to go not to the press but directly to the people, and to do it in a way that could not be intercepted, could not be spun, and could not be ignored. The quiet war was over. The public battle for the truth was about to begin. Their refuge was a cramped basement apartment belonging to Anya's cousin, a law student. The air smelled of old carpet and instant noodles. Daniel sat on a futon, head in his hands. Leo was with a trusted friend from his old unit, safe for now. The cloud backup was a bluff, Daniel admitted, his voice hollow. "The phone's gone. The pictures, the recording of Miller, it's all gone. Anya paced the small room, her journalist's mind working furiously. Then we don't rely on documents, we rely on people. The story is the conspiracy itself. The fabricated threat, the backdated memo, the coerced silence, the attempt to grab us in a parking lot. We have Sarah's testimony, even if it's anonymous. We have my notes, and we have you. She stopped, looking at him. You are the evidence, Daniel, your integrity against her power. We take it live, to a platform they can't control. Live like a press conference. They'll just say I'm unstable, a disgruntled employee. Not a press conference, Anya said, a determined glint in her eye. A public forum. The city council is holding a hearing tomorrow morning on the new Sentinel Shield contract. It's a dry, bureaucratic process. But as a concerned citizen and a direct witness to the failures of the previous security apparatus, you have a right to testify. They have to let you speak. And I know a councilwoman who will make sure you're called. Once you're at that microphone, under oath, with cameras streaming it live on the city's public access channel, you tell your story. Not to reporters she can pressure, but directly to the people. It was a terrifying gambit. It placed him squarely in the lion's den, surrounded by the governor's allies. But it was also a direct line to the public, uncut and unfiltered. Daniel nodded, a slow, steady resolve replacing the fear. Okay. The next morning, the city council chamber was a study in polished wood and dull routine. A handful of officials sat at the dais. A few bored reporters lounged in the back. The agenda item was the approval of an emergency interim contract for Sentinel Shield. The governor's chief of staff, Charles Vance, was there, smooth and confident, ready to deliver reassuring testimony about enhanced security protocols. Then Councilwoman Brenda Lee, a sharp-eyed woman known for her independence, spoke. Before we vote, I believe it's pertinent to hear from a stakeholder with recent, direct experience. I call Mr. Daniel Daniels to provide testimony. A murmur went through the room. Vance's smile stiffened. Daniel, wearing his only suit, a slightly too tight jacket from his army days, walked to the microphone. He saw Anya give him a small nod from the audience. The public access camera's red light glowed. For a moment, the words stuck in his throat. He thought of Leo. He thought of Charlotte Hayes, alone in that hallway. He began to speak. He didn't start with conspiracy. He started with the child. He described finding a scared little girl, the call to the emergency line, the governor's gratitude that turned into an offer with strings. He described the pressure, the investigators, the leaked stories painting him as unstable. He held up a printed copy of the altered school log. Then, his voice growing stronger, he detailed the visit from Agent Miller, the revelation of the fabricated threat briefing, and the sign-in sheet with Vance's signature. He named Sarah, protecting her as a junior staffer in the Chief of Staff's office. Finally, he described the attempted detention by Sentinel Shield operatives the night before. This isn't about a contract, he concluded, looking straight at the camera. It's about how far power will go to hide its mistakes. It used a child as a prop and is now trying to silence anyone who objects. I'm just a janitor, but I took an oath once to protect people. That doesn't expire. The chamber was dead silent. Then chaos erupted. Vance was on his feet shouting about slanderous fiction. The councilwoman gavelled for order, but the story was out. The unassuming public access stream, watched by maybe a few hundred people, was being clipped, shared, and amplified. The raw, under-oath testimony from the soft-spoken janitor was immune to spin. It had the ring of truth. The governor's office went into immediate damage control, issuing a furious denial and threatening legal action. But the seed was planted. Other news outlets, now protected by the fact that the story was already public, picked it up. Reporters descended on Agent Miller's cabin. Under the sudden spotlight, Miller, perhaps seeing a chance for redemption or simply exhausted by the guilt, confirmed the broad strokes of Daniel's testimony to a wire service reporter. The order came from Vance, was his simple, devastating quote. The dominoes began to fall. The state attorney general, an elected official from the opposing party who could no longer ignore the firestorm, announced a formal investigation into the contract award and the events of that night. Facing a potential criminal probe, Charles Vance resigned to spend more time with his family. His departure was the crack in the dam. The most surprising detail, however, came not from a prosecutor or a politician, but from a 7-year-old girl. In the midst of the media frenzy, Governor Eleanor Hayes gave a televised address from her residence. She was alone, no podium, no flag pin. She looked exhausted, her polished image finally frayed. She admitted to a profound failure of leadership and took responsibility for the culture that allowed this to happen. She announced she was withdrawing the Sentinel Shield contract and would not seek re-election. It was a stunning capitulation. But as she finished, a small figure slipped into the frame behind her. It was Charlotte. She tugged on her mother's sleeve, and the governor, her composure breaking, knelt down. The little girl whispered in her ear, then handed her a piece of paper. The governor, her eyes wet, held it up to the camera. It was a crayon drawing. It showed a tall man in blue and a small girl with braids, holding hands. In wobbly letters at the top, it read, "Thank you, Mr. Daniel." That moment, unscripted and profoundly human, changed everything. The public's anger toward the governor softened into a complex mix of pity and disappointment. The narrative fully shifted from political scandal to a story about a failed cover-up and the simple, unbought decency of an ordinary man. The Attorney General's investigation eventually resulted in misdemeanor charges for Vance for official misconduct, but no charges for the governor. The system had absorbed the shock, punished a fall guy, and moved on. For Daniel, the aftermath was quieter but life-changing. The school district, under new leadership, reinstated him with full back pay and a public apology. The OCFS investigation was closed with a finding of no merit. He was offered dozens of jobs, book deals, speaking engagements. He declined almost all of them. He took one offer, a role as a facilities and safety consultant for the school district, using his experience to help rewrite protocols to ensure no child was ever overlooked again. He and Leo moved to a slightly better apartment, but he kept his ring of keys. Months later, on the first day of the new school year, Daniel was doing a routine check of the kindergarten wing. He turned a corner and saw a familiar face. Governor Hayes, now just Eleanor Hayes, was kneeling, adjusting her daughter's backpack. Charlotte saw Daniel first and waved eagerly. Hayes stood up, meeting his gaze. The distance between them held all the recent history: power, fear, anger, and a child's crayon drawing. Hayes gave a slow, slight nod of acknowledgement, no longer a command but a recognition. Daniel nodded back. Then he continued on his rounds, the quiet guardian of the hallway, his world no longer defined by the crisis he'd endured, but by the peace he'd helped restore. The collision was over. The cleanup, the real and lasting kind, had begun. So what does this story leave us with? Not just a tale of political intrigue, but a map of two kinds of power. One was concentrated, visible, and backed by every resource imaginable. The other was diffuse, quiet, and rooted in a simple, unwavering principle: a child in distress must be comforted, and a lie must be named. Daniel's power wasn't in his title or his bank account. It was in his refusal to be corrupted, first by fear and then by favor. He didn't set out to be a hero. He set out to be a decent man. And in doing so, he became a catalyst that an entire system of obfuscation could not withstand. This raises a question that lingers long after the headlines fade. In our own lives, how often do we mistake visibility for importance? We celebrate the figures on the stage, the voices in the boardroom, the faces on the ballot. But the true guardians of our collective well-being are often the people we look through: the janitors, the nurses, the mechanics, the teachers. They are the ones who, in a moment of unscripted crisis, hold the fabric of our society together. Their authority comes not from a title, but from their presence in the gaps that bureaucracy creates. Daniel's story also exposes the anatomy of a cover-up. It's rarely a single, monstrous lie. It's 1,000 small compromises: a log altered, a memo backdated, a source pressured, a narrative massaged. It relies on the assumption that ordinary people, when faced with the full weight of institutional pressure, will choose the path of least resistance. Daniel's defiance was powerful precisely because it was so statistically improbable. He was the variable the algorithm didn't account for. In the end, the governor's downfall wasn't caused by a rival or a prosecutor. It was triggered by a crayon drawing. A child's authentic gratitude, expressed in wobbly letters, became the one piece of evidence that couldn't be spun, denied, or buried. It cut through the political calculus and reminded everyone of the human cost at the center of the scandal. The most secure child in the state was, for one terrifying evening, the most vulnerable. And the man in the blue jumpsuit was the only security she had. This is the enduring lesson. Integrity is a force multiplier. It turns a phone photo into evidence, a whispered testimony into a truth, and a quiet janitor into an immovable object. In a world that often rewards complexity and compromise, never underestimate the revolutionary power of simple, stubborn decency. If this story of quiet courage resonated with you, if it reminded you that character is what we do when no one is watching, then do us a favor. Hit the like button. It helps more people find these important narratives. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person can make a difference. And of course, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We dedicate ourselves to bringing you the human stories behind the headlines, the moments where ordinary people change the world. Thank you for watching. Remember, the most powerful people in the room aren't always the ones speaking. Sometimes they're the ones listening in the hallway, ready to do what's right. We'll see you in the next story.